We are.
All right. All right. Welcome to the session of Orangeville Town Council for Monday, September 14th. Due to efforts to contain the spread of COVID-19 and to protect all individuals, the council chambers at Town Hall will not be open to the public to attend council meetings until further notice. Members of the public who have an interest in a matter listed on the agenda may, up until 10 a.m. on the day of the scheduled council meeting, email councilagenda@orangeville.ca indicating your request to speak to a matter listed on the agenda. A phone number and conference ID code will be provided to you so that you may join the virtual meeting and provide your comments to council. Members of the public wishing to raise a question during the public question period of the council meeting may, beginning at 8 p.m. on the evening of the council meeting, call 1-289-801-5774 and enter conference ID 437-05-890 #. Correspondence and emails submitted will be considered as public information and entered into the public record. If you require access to information in an alternative format, please contact the Clerk's Division by phone at 519-941-0440, extension 2256, or via email at the Clerk's Department at orangeville.ca. We had an earlier session and closed of the Town Council meeting where we approved the agenda for tonight. I would like to ask if there are any disclosures of direct or indirect pecuniary interests. I understand Councillor Sherwood has one.
Yes, Your Worship. We have a delegation tonight from 11.2 for the Orangeville Blues and Jazz, and I will be declaring pecuniary interest as I'm a volunteer with Orangeville Blues and Jazz.
Very good. In tonight's closed meeting, the following occurred, and there was a recommendation that a closed meeting of the council be held in pursuant to section 239-2 of the Municipal Act for the purpose of considering the following subject matters: a confidential report of the CAO's office 2020-1013 regarding personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, public office holders, and this was regarding Orangeville Hydro Board of Director appointments. There's also a confidential verbal report from Mr. Brennan, the CAO, regarding a position plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or behalf of the municipality or local board, and a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of the land by the municipality or local board, potential land acquisition. And there were two parcels of land that were discussed by council and staff. Also, there was a confidential verbal report from CAO Ed Brennan regarding personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, labor relations or employee negotiations, public office holders, and it was to discuss the OPS-OPP transition in our in-camera session, and for staff to proceed as directed. Thank you. All right. Is Mr. Nairn with us tonight? Mr. Nairn.
Mr. Mayor, it's Tracy here. I've just received an email from Mr. Nairn and also from Miss Hayes, who's listed as a delegate, that they're having trouble with the call-in feature. They're just getting some static. So I've let Dan know that. So hopefully he's maybe able to assist.
All right. Thank you. Let's
I'll try the phone number here, and I can let you know, Mr. Mayor, if we get anything.
Well, let's carry on with our land acknowledgement and the further announcements by Chair. Item 7, we would like to acknowledge the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe people, including the Ojibwe, Potawatomi, and Odawa of the Three Fires Confederacy. This meeting is being aired on public television and are streamed live and may be taped for later public broadcast or webcast. Your name is part of the public record and will be included in the minutes of this meeting. We've already had the rise and report of item number 9. I'm sorry? Right. Okay, so councillors, I read the rise and report. We need to have somebody move that and to second it. Deputy Mayor McIntosh and seconded by Councillor Post. This is the Rise and Report recommendations. All in favor?
Yes.
That's unanimous. Thank you. Any luck there, Mr. Bonato? Councillor Peters, you wish to speak to that?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I was wondering if there was a more specific motion coming out of our discussion regarding the hydro board, or if that will be addressed at a later date.
Well, I think at a later date, we do have to contact a couple of those people regarding extensions, I believe, Councillor Peters. So
certainly, okay.
We'll that'll be coming at a later date. Just check with the clerk, and she's nodding her head. Yes. So, Mr. Bonato, any luck here?
Through you, Your Worship, not currently. It actually does seem like the phone line is having some issues for the call-in number. So there is a couple other numbers with Microsoft Teams, so I can give them a try. If there's anything else we're able to move on to in the meantime.
Okay. Madam Clerk, yeah, I think so. So, folks, with your indulgence, why don't we all just sing our national anthem together?
That would be great.
All right, I'll get it started. Oh, Canada, our home and native
land,
true
patriot love,
in all thy sunshine,
With glowing hearts we
see
the true and free from the high
for thee, God, be our land, glorious and free. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada,
we stand on guard for thee.
All right,
let's not do that again.
let's play ball. Sorry, folks, but anyway, we got through that. Okay. Back to our agenda. We did already vote on the Rise and Report of item number 9. Item 10 is adoption of minutes of previous council meetings. Could I have a motion that the following meetings be received? Is 10.1, the August 10th, 2020 council and closed session, and the August 6th special council meeting. Councillor Sherwood, seconded by Councillor Andrews. All in favor?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, now we've got presentations and petitions and delegations. Is Ms. Heather Hayes with us tonight? I think that was
I believe she's another phone delegate that can't.
Okay, so we'll move along. Mr. Kurtz and Mr. Leach, are you available? Again, there's Larry. How are you doing, Larry?
Good to see you.
Good. Okay, so
Thanks
you have the
for
floor.
inviting us.
You have the floor, sir.
Okay. I guess my purpose here tonight is just to make a delegation on behalf of Orangeville Blues and Jazz Festival. First of all, to thank the town of Orangeville and staff and councillors for all your support in the past leading up to the present time that we're in now with this pandemic. We've always really appreciated everything that the town of Orangeville does, and we feel like we have a great festival, and we would just like to ensure that we can continue bringing the best festival possible to the residents of the town of Orangeville. I guess my point tonight is just to ask for reconsideration on the last month's decision about our funding. We really would like to keep the funding that was promised to us when we in the spring from the town. This year, because of the pandemic, we're facing a loss financially. We are not able to collect income that we usually do. We were planning to run a great festival again when the pandemic hit, and unfortunately, we were not able to collect from our sponsors and collect all the money that we normally would. We did go ahead and plan as if we were going to have a festival, which created a loss this year, unfortunately. We, back in March, made a decision to have a festival this year, and we decided at that point to shut down all of our operations, to not continue any spending, lay off all staff. So we've been on hold since that point. Being one of the first festivals probably to have to make that decision, we were only about 10 weeks out when we had to make it. So we were going full steam as if we were going to have a festival, which resulted again in a loss that we're trying to mitigate. Our sponsorship director, Peter Ross, bless his heart, has been working really and trying to make sure that the festival can collect as much income as possible to offset any losses. We were able to do so. We've probably been able to collect about $40,000, but unfortunately, we had expenses of up to $75,000. So this money that we were allocated back in the spring is really important to us to allow us to continue to move forward and try to plan for what we're going to do when we're able to get back at it. So I'm just here to ask for a reconsideration of that decision and answer any question you have.
Okay, Councillor Andrews.
Well, Deputy Mayor McIntosh had his hand up before me, so.
All right, Deputy Mayor McIntosh, go right ahead.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Thank you, Your Worship. I voted against the, I believe it's 15%. However, part of the reason was that this group brings in millions of dollars to the town. I just don't think it was right to limit it to 15%. I didn't agree with it then. I don't agree with it now. A couple of meetings ago, we did actually give some money to Theatre Orangeville. I just don't see why we can't give some money to this group as well. As I said, they do bring in millions of dollars to the town. And I just think we need to reconsider our vote. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Andrews and then Councillor Post.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, and I agree with the Deputy Mayor on this particular matter. At the time that the decision was made in a previous council meeting, we had information that was provided to us that provided a little bit of detail, maybe to a lot of detail. The most recent information that we received in our council package provided further detail, which in fact really has led me to reconsider my vote on this particular item at the time. Looking at the economic benefits to this community, they are significant. Mr. Kurtz and his executive team and those that are involved from a volunteer perspective and the performers, we missed having this event tremendously, and I know that the business community also, especially in the downtown core, missed having this event this year. We can't predict what's going to happen with COVID moving forward, but one of my major concerns was in fact the significant hit to the organization, especially depleting their reserves to the point that it would be problematic moving forward into 2021 if events of this magnitude would be allowed. So I would seriously like to reconsider looking at this and provide the full allocation back to the Orangeville Blues and Jazz Festival.
Okay. Councillor Post.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I think that I want to start off by saying that my vote at the previous council meeting will stand only because I think that it's an integrity to the community grant process. Now, I did speak to Mr. Kurtz offline at a different time, and my suggestion to him at that point was, I think that in order to be fair to the organizations who all apply through the community grant process and for what the system is to do so, one of the suggestions that I made to Mr. Kurtz was perhaps to apply for some of the COVID relief funding rather than through the community grant process. I think the community grant process guidelines are clear in deliverables, and unfortunately, through no fault of the Blues and Jazz Festival, they weren't able to deliver a festival. And for other organizations that weren't able to deliver, we've asked for them to return funds. So I think that the right thing to do here is to keep to that for the process of community grants, and perhaps Ms. Syed can jump in from an accounting perspective if she has anything to offer. But my concern is just to the process itself and not to the Blues and Jazz. This is in no way against Blues and Jazz Festival. They're a huge asset to our community, and I'd love to be able to help them. I just don't know that the community grant process then is the right way to help them. I think at this point it might be through a COVID relief grant, as we did for Orangeville Music Theatre and other organizations who required the funding as a result of of COVID-19.
Right. Okay. Ms. Syed, do you wish to comment?
To your worship, I have nothing further to add.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Councillors, any further comments? Councillor Taylor.
Your worship, just as a process standpoint, are we to text you this meeting, or how do we get into the queue? What are we doing?
Well, whatever you would like to do. I'm
okay. I texted and then we were going to pass on. So
I had my phone closed. It's now open. My apologies. So yeah, go ahead.
No problem. So I just want to make a clarification first off, and that is Theatre Orangeville did not receive a grant from this group. Orangeville Musical Theatre received a grant from this group. Completely different organizations and not tied to each other. Orangeville Theatre, you could suggest that potentially received $25,000, but they did not get that $25,000. That was done as part of the concert series, and Theatre Orangeville was involved in that, but has not received any benefit under these circumstances. And then the other piece is, so I don't think any politician, and I hate using that word, so community activist would want to stand against Larry Kurtz and his wonderful festival. Like it just makes no sense at all. Why would we do this? The reality is, though, is the process that we've got is broken. I think I do side with Councillor Post in that. I'd love to give Mr. Kurtz and his team the funding that he requires and ensure that he goes away happy. I'm not sure that we've got this process set up. So I wonder if we verbally agree that we'll give it, but it has to come out of the right bucket of money. And the grant process is, I don't know. We got to be the worst council ever on the grant process, because we're all trying to do such good things, but we can't stick to a rule if our life depended on it. So anyway, but my diatribe ends with let's give Blues and Jazz the money. Let's just figure out how we're going to get it to them.
Right, and I think that's exactly what Councillor Post was just stating.
Yeah.
Councillor Andrews, go ahead.
Yeah, again, I echo Councillor Taylor's point. However we can find the money, let's just get this back on track for the Orangeville Blues and Jazz Festival. They mean so much to our community, and moving forward, we have to make sure that this particular festival runs in 2021.
Okay, so it sounds to me like rather than revisiting the vote from this, that we should ask Mr. Kurtz to make an application to the COVID relief money that we had put aside back in March. Is that what I'm reading here, councillors? Councillor Post, is that what your thought was?
That was what my thought was. Now, I don't know that it needs to be a completely separate application process at this point. We've had delegations come forward and just speak and ask, as did Orangeville Music Theatre, and I think that we can probably move forward with that today. Mr. Kurtz has given us more than enough information to do so. I really want to make sure that it comes out of the right bucket of money and that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing when it comes to community grants. The conversation that I had with Mr. Kurtz, I hope you don't mind that I'm passing this on in a big public session, but one of the comments that I had with him and the conversation that I had is Orangeville Blues and Jazz is applying every year for roughly the same amount of money, somewhere between the $15,000 and $20,000 in money. And when we're looking at the community grant process, we've got a bucket of money of $80,000 or $75,000, whatever that is. And one of the things that we talked about is maybe that's not the right spot for Orangeville Blues and Jazz. Maybe it's something that we look at budgeting in the future. And if we're going to consistently be saying we're going to support the Blues and Jazz because of the economic development piece, maybe it's a budgeted item that's different than the community grant process, because then we're still able to help the smaller organizations who are really looking for the additional funding as well in a different way. And it's not going to push them aside from wanting to apply.
Right. Councillor Peters.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. And just to make my thoughts clear on this as well, the festival is obviously a gem for the town. It's done wonderful things, and I fully support it. It's a wonderful time of year. I was sorry to miss it this year, as we all were. My thoughts aligned with Councillor Post in terms of the groups that reached out to us and did or did not put on their event need to be treated equally. And I had a separate conversation with Mr. Leach on the same topic. And maybe this is getting into the weeds a bit, but I just, again, want to make sure that the town is giving value for the taxpayer as well. Through you to Mr. Kurtz, are you able to share where the reserves are at for the festival? I mean, we've spoken a lot about the potential of future festivals being severely impacted, but we haven't actually, seen the values, and we can certainly take your word for it. You know best, you and the board, but that piece of information was missing, and I hate to ask, but I think it's
well, we have a loss of about $25,000 this year, and the reserves we're somewhere over just over $40,000 now. We had a reserve of close to $75,000 a few years ago.
Right. Okay, thank you.
We're not dead in the water, but we could be doing better.
Right, and I certainly don't want you guys to get down to that line, but it's entirely possible that a group could be sitting on more than they let on, and I just want to make sure it's fair to the taxpayer that
I'll put it this way: if we had not taken action that we did, we would have been down to zero. And through lots of effort, we're able to recover some of the loss, but we're certainly not in a reserve like we wish we were before the pandemic.
Right. Okay, thank you.
If I could ask one more question, Mr. Kurtz, when do you feel you need to get a checkered flag from the province to make 2021 a reality? Have you got kind of a drop dead date that you're thinking about?
In my mind, I'd love to see it early in the new year at the latest. We start planning in September for the following June. So the sooner the better for us. That being said, we had a good plan in place. So a lot of the planning is already done for the next time. We had a good plan as if you're allowed to gather large groups of people. So obviously now we're modifying the plan, and it's a wait and see what we're allowed to do. We definitely want to put on a festival in some form next year. We want to plan to run a great festival. It's just a matter of the form it's going to take.
Right. Okay. I don't know, Councillor Post, do you want to put a motion out there of what your thoughts were, and we can kick that around?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to allot I don't know the dollar amount, so I'm going to need help on that. $12,000, I think, from the COVID relief fund that we've got to the Orangeville Blues and Jazz Festival, and returned from the community grant portion. So,
Councillor Taylor, is your hand up to second that motion? Yes. Okay. All right. Any further? I think if I remember the numbers, it's like 4,200 or something that we approved, and 17,150. So it's more like 13,000, I believe, is the correct number. But Ms. Syed can nail that down. Our intention is to top you up to the 17,150. Any further discussion, councillors? Councillor Andrews, you wish to?
Yeah, just very quickly, and I appreciate Councillor Post's point of maybe looking at, as we move into the budget for 2021, an alternative line that could end up supporting the Orangeville Blues and Jazz Festival moving forward. I appreciate that point tremendously.
Okay, without any further comment, councillors will vote on that motion. All in favor? And opposed? Councillor Sherwood, I did not see you. Well, so
She has a conflict on
I'm sorry, I apologize. You've got a conflict. So that was passed unanimously with 1 abstention. Thank you. All right, Mr. Kurtz, thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll talk to you soon. Thank you. All right, moving along. We have, that is item 11.2, 11.3. We have Mr. Rob Taylor from the Orangeville Otters. Mr. Taylor, are you with us?
Your Worship, I don't think Mr. Taylor was able to join us. I was communicating with him earlier and he can't get through on the link.
Okay, and who's with us then? I'm sorry, I can't see you there.
So I'm Andrew Perry. I'm co-chair of the board of the Otters.
Right. Hi, Andrew. Okay, well, if you'd like to speak to Mr. Taylor's letter, go right ahead.
So just point out 2 things. You yourself and Mr. Osmond should be in receipt of a letter, email from Dan Thompson from Merthyr Pools, just requesting when the tender does go out for this project that we not exclude polished stainless steel tanks from consideration. Those are the premier tanks that would be used for any modern facility going into place. The other thing I would encourage you all to consider when you're looking at whether you install a 6-lane pool or an 8-lane pool is the analogy of comparing it to a hockey rink. Putting in a 6-lane pool at this stage would be equivalent of putting in a 3/4 size ice pad somewhere in the town. We don't install 3/4 size ice pads. If we're going to put an ice pad in, we put an ice pad in that's built big enough to play hockey in. The same idea we'd like you to apply to the pool. If you're going to put a pool in, we want it to be a competition-sized pool so that it can be used for that purpose. Great example, following in the back of the Blues and Jazz. Having a competition ability within the town of Orangeville allows us to bring in far more substantial competition to the town. It'd be, for example, when we hosted a long course event in Markham in 2018, being outside the town, brought in about 750 athletes over a full 3 days from 11 different clubs scattered across central and southern Ontario. We could be doing the same thing on about an 80 to 85% scale of that here in Orangeville in a short course version if we were to have at least an 8-lane tank. 8-lane tanks moving the town are the way that the sport is going. Likewise, when we put in a tank, it's having it competition quality is not exclusive of all the other uses for the tank. For example, someone going in to do therapy, hydrotherapy, to do learn to swim applications, to do any of the other exercises with the vertical water outfits that you would use it for. They can still use that for all those applications. However, if we limit it in size and limit it in quality, it does negate us being able to use it for high quality competition.
Right. If I could ask you, if you hosted an event in Markham, is that correct?
Yeah, we've hosted 3 events in Markham, actually.
And this is a profit-making venture, I presume, for your club?
They are.
Yeah.
They are profit-making for us, and also the profit-making for the town, especially a town with the size and demographic of Orangeville. You take that many families coming in, they would typically come in either on a Thursday night and stay through to a Sunday, or a Friday night stay through to a Sunday. That's use of your hotels, use of your restaurants, use of all the corner stores, the gas stations, all of those things on a full-scale basis. The other aspect is we don't want to get caught up in the service delivery model of Learn to Swim. Learn to Swim is a very key pillar of the whole aquatic facility we want to have involved. However, if we only focus on that aspect of service delivery to our community, we are leaving out a large portion. The otters right now, we're well over 200 families have expanded quite a lot in the last few years. Well over 200 families represents a huge portion of our community and a town the size of Orangeville, and that service delivery is being worked with through the club.
Right. Okay, Councillor Taylor and then Councillor Sherwood. Councillor Taylor.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Through you to our guest. I'm just curious, I don't have any questions about Alder Street Arena, but given what we need to consider for the rest of our town as regards to swimming, what would be your recommendations regarding Tony Rose?
So ideally, we would not want to close Tony Rose until we had the future second pool up and online. Right now, if we were to expand Alder to 8 lanes, which I really suggest that you do at this time, given that the pool is down, that would give us 14 full lanes of swimming capacity in the town. Tony Rose will eventually need replacement, and it is in the master plan for the future of developing a second pool. I would just encourage you to make sure there's overlap, in that we don't close facility until that pool is up and ready to go, and then we can close that pool entirely.
Right. Yeah. So just
does that answer your question?
It does. I just, through Your Worship, if I may, just as clarity, to understand what you're saying is make sure that we're keeping Tony Rose open while Alder is being constructed. Post Alder, you're suggesting that Tony could be closed.
It's actually half right. Post Alder as well, I would like to see Tony Rose remain open, not close it immediately. Keep it open until the additional second pool is completed at some point down the road. The idea is we always want to have 2 pools available within the town, at least one of which should be an 8-lane competition quality tank.
And is this, through Your Worship, is the second pool, is that you're thinking, is that Tony Rose? Is that what you're suggesting?
Tony Rose, or reviewing the master plan that was put out earlier in the summer, whatever that replacement for Tony Rose is, but provided there is overlap, then in that Tony Rose is not closed until that second pool is functional.
My understanding is the way I'm thinking is that this renovation would be done, and the next decision is what to do about Tony Rose. And second pool isn't necessarily on the table.
Okay, it was in the long-term plan portion of the master plan as I read it, but the way it was, that was in the long-term portion. In the mid-term portion was the closing of Tony Rose. I just want to make sure if we do that, we have overlap with the second pool. So post Alder, I would say yes, we would definitely want to keep Tony Rose open.
Okay, Councillor Sherwood, and then Councillor Andrews.
Yes, Your Worship, through you to the delegate, and I'm sorry I missed your name.
Mr. Perry.
Okay,
Andrew
thank you.
Perry. Yeah.
Councillor Taylor has hit my question spot on, and I think I'm just going to reiterate for clarification. Your club. First of all, I want to congratulate you on the enrollment numbers. That was really interesting stats to read about. How much your club has expanded. That's fabulous. But you're making it clear that you still require more than 8 lanes to run your organization. So in other words, you want Alder and Tony Rose running for your club. Because as Councillor Taylor mentioned, if we were to close Tony Rose, I don't recall ever a talk of another pool being built. I was under the impression we were just going to expand the 2 extra lanes. So if Tony Rose was to close, you would still not be able to function with just 8 lanes. Is that what I'm gathering?
That would not be ideal. We would definitely be functioning at reduced capacity, much as we are about to start this coming season at slightly reduced capacity based on the COVID situation and the Alder being currently closed. We're opening essentially with one pool at Tony Rose. I was referring to when I went through the master plan earlier that came out. It was the short-term plan was the possible expansion of Alder into an 8-lane pool. Following that, in the midterm, I read that it would be Tony Rose would be closed, and then in the long term, there was plans or discussion of a second pool. Perhaps I'm mistaken there in my reading of the master plan, because obviously you folks have delved into that a lot deeper than I have. I looked specifically at that area. One thing I did very much like from the master plan was the idea that it encompassed much more than simply the town of Orangeville itself. As we, for one, we draw in people from well outside of the Orangeville town limits. There's people that travel from 45 minutes, some even more than an hour, to come and be part of our program here based on the quality of the program that we provide.
Just to follow up, Your Worship, in answer to my direct question, would you be able to function with 8 lanes? Would your organization be able to function with just an 8-lane pool?
We would not want to try to function with just the 8-lane pool. Okay, but
okay,
we always make something work. We definitely would not. We don't want to fold up shop, but we wouldn't be able to continue our expansion the way we have been.
Before we get too much into the weeds here, because really tonight's decision is about 2 options that have been presented for the repair of Alder. I think the Tony Rose discussion is for another day, but thank you, Mr. Perry, very much. Any for Mr. Andrews?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes. Thank you very much, Your Worship, and Mr. Perry, thank you very much for being a part of tonight's delegation. Again, from my perspective, I've admired the auditors for quite some time, and congratulations on the growth of your organization. What impact has your organization faced by having the relocation from Alder to Tony Rose for this period of time?
Well, we were able to open early and have we ran about a 6-week camp for 48 of our swimmers that went through the summer period immediately before our what would normally be our startup. Our startup for any given season would normally happen about now. At this stage, it's not happening until the 21st or probably the 28th, based on the one pool situation and things happening with the COVID concern. So it's we were able to make that work. However, we coupled that with swimming at the C3 quarry in Caledon. And basically what we divided was we focused on technique and technique-based issues with the groups as they went through Tony Rose. And they did their aerobic portions, the training portions, when they were on their quarry days. The key impetus behind that was the air quality at Tony Rose. When you're trying to force the athlete to work hard in that environment, you can rapidly develop breathing issues. Just because they are so close to the water and they're inhaling those the chemicals that are frothed up by the use of the pool itself. That's one of the drawbacks to that particular the setup at Tony Rose. The air quality is very, very poor.
Okay, Councillor Taylor.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I didn't want you to let Mr. Perry go before we got to get a good understanding here. I appreciate this. Mr. Perry, one of the things that I have been told by numerous participants in the audit program, first of all, they all love it and speak very highly of it, but the big debilitating issue is that we can't have tournaments. And if we have the 8 lanes that Mr. Osmond has laid out for us, does that mean that your organization can have these provincial or even North American tournaments and generate income and provide for your members in the way that you want them to in a kind of a world-class sort of way, or are we still woefully inadequate?
That would, an 8-lane pool would allow us to host regional level championships. For example, right now we swim in what's called Huronia region, which is basically Orangeville is the southernmost portion of that. We won the championships here last year, but we are unable to actually host the championship. Our next major competitors are the city of Barrie. They are about twice the size of us, but on a per capita basis, they don't have the same quality of swimmers and coaching that we have here in Orangeville. So we actually travel to Owen Sound quite frequently. It's quite hosted in Owen Sound. Aurelia has just come on board. They are opening their 8-lane pool this season. So the intention, pre-COVID of course, was we were going to co-host this season championship with them in Aurelia. So essentially it opens us up to hosting a regional championship level event, and much more on the financial side. Larger invitational events are normally the events that draw more swimmers into the area and are more of a financial benefit to the host club, and by extension to the community that the event is taking place in. Just because the invitationals are generally bigger than some of our championship events.
That's great. Thank you for your answer.
Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, just to expand on that thought about the events, Mr. Perry, could you comment on how many events you could foresee the club hosting over a given season, or say over 5 years? Like, how often would the town realize that benefit?
Yeah. So looking at a typical season, beginning swimming in September and running through to the bulk of the club swims until about the end of July, with our national and Olympic level swimmers going until about the middle to the end of August. I would anticipate we would love to host 5 events through any given season, and they would be varying in size throughout the season. But just in Alder itself, in a 6-lane configuration, before some of the other towns started to further develop their aquatic facilities, we've had meets there where we've had 1,000 kids in for a weekend. With an 8-lane pool, we could easily, triple that for some of those weekends.
Okay, very good. Councillors, any further questions to Mr. Perry? Seeing none. Well, thank you. Thank you for answering all these questions. We've learned a lot and appreciate it. We're going to move along on our agenda now. But thank you, Mr.
Very much, Your Worship. You all have a good night.
Yes, thank you for joining us. Appreciate it. All right, councillors. So as we move along the agenda here, the next item are staff reports, and following on the discussion with Mr. Perry, we have a report from Mr. Osmond. Mr. Osmond, are you with us?
I am, Your Worship. Good evening.
Wondering if you could take over and talk further about the report that you've prepared.
Well, first of all, let me say thank you to the auditors for coming on with a delegation, and I'm really excited, of course, talking about the various meets. One of the things about the 8-lane environment is that you have the ability to host far more meets than you do right now. Just for clarification on the master plan, so we're clear on it, the third tank. Right now, you have 3 tanks in Orangeville. You have 2 tanks at Alder, one being a lap pool tank and one being a leisure tank. And you have Tony Rose, of course, which is a 6-lane tank as well. And what the master plan says is that you can satisfy the demand for Orangeville. Keyword here is Orangeville for the foreseeable future, certainly into the midterm of the master plan and a little bit beyond. And where the second, or in this case a third pad or third tank comes up is when you look at the region. So if the population were to increase and the demand were to increase, what the master plan is basically saying is Orangeville itself doesn't need to construct another tank. The region may want to consider putting in another tank, and then that discussion would be a collaboration between Orangeville and other municipalities before the town moves forward with any other tanks. So that's just to clarify the master plan. The environment that you're swimming in right now, again, for clarity, and is really important for this environment as well, for stainless steel tanks. is that when you have a small environment, in which is, the pool at Tony Rose is 50 years old, almost 50 years old, and what Mr. Perry alluded to was he has chemical on top of the water. What we have is chloramines on top of the water, and with that particular environment, it's very, very difficult to take chloramines off the top of the water, and it's about 8 to 12 inches of gassy waste, if you would, on top of the water that comes from a eye invigorated swimming environment. And in the case of alder, we don't have it as much. In the case of a stainless steel tank, it wouldn't be eliminated, but it would be almost eliminated because of that system. So it's really important to keep that in mind from the gas, if you would, sits on top of the water. And in an environment such as Tony Rose, with our systems we have for air handling, they're quite outdated now, and it's very difficult to get the quality that you want in the air. However, that being said, unfortunately, what we have is a situation where the age of the alder pool liner, the membrane, is now failed. It was we were originally told it was a 15-year life expectancy. We're beyond that expectancy. We're into 18 years now. We've been experienced a number of problems with that pool in the last couple of years, or in the last 3 or 4 years. And in one case here, as I said in my report, we did repair up to 260 holes in that liner, and we had leaks. So we were losing water on a continuous basis in the system, even before we shut down. Then it got a little worse, and then we had a big break, of course, and we lost a lot of water. And the water was so bad that it went out through the steps and out to the exit door onto alder. And then we went back and we had our mechanical guys go back in, take a look at the liner, see if they can repair it. And we said we'd try another repair. That repair failed again. And of course, we're now in the position where we have to move forward. It should be noted, of course, that we did have this on the radar in our capital budget, that we need to replace this liner. It was coming up, 15 years is up, and it's going into its 17th year, and we need to deal with the liner. And as I say in the report, and you all know, of course, that we looked at the ICIP as a way of dealing with that. And the infrastructure fund, of course, came back and said, sorry, Orangeville, we can't fund this particular project. And so that opportunity we've lost. And what we did originally is we went back, because it was a quick, if you recall, we had to do a quick response on a program that came out on infrastructure. We responded quickly. We put together what we had to already on our system in terms of costing. We used the actual costing for a replacement for what we have now. And we also included, of course, the wet playground area and so on and so forth. And when I did the research, and I've done a lot of research on these pools, and I'm sure there were people that would conflict with what I'm saying in terms of the different systems. We all have different systems. I looked at the stainless steel, I looked at the coated steel, and I looked at, of course, concrete. Concrete is what you have essentially in Tony Rose. That we have, of course, done with the tiles. Concrete is not going to be something we can do in Alder right now. Concrete would be something you would do if you're building a new pool. We don't have the roof off of this thing. We'd have to take the walls out, try to get concrete in there. So we're actually dealing with either a coated steel membrane or a stainless steel membrane. Both can work really easily in terms of expanding the pool to 8 lanes. And what we wanted to do back when we started with the ICIP is we got an opportunity here to look at the sport tourism piece. We have an opportunity here not only to supply more lanes to the otters and the swim team, but an 8-lane pool gives us more capacity to handle more lessons and teach more classes and so on in a bigger environment. So that was the reason pre-COVID. Post-COVID, of course, we still get a good advantage to having a bigger space because we can host more people. That being said, we looked at all the different environments. So from a stainless steel perspective, it is more expensive. It's faster to install. And when I looked at the research, this has been on the go in Europe. They've had stainless steel pools in Europe since the 70s, and there's over 5,000 plus installations since the 70s, and they're still going strong. In the aquatic environment in the US, both outdoors and indoors, stainless steel is quite popular. And again, it's, and I think Mr. Perry alluded to it, from a competitive perspective, even the Olympics as well, stainless steel is what they would suggest would have faster water, and they get faster times in a stainless steel environment. what I put forward is obviously it was a more expensive version, but in terms of the economics of it and the efficiencies of it and the zero maintenance or low maintenance over a long period of time, we would not be looking at a 15-year replacement or a 20-year replacement. We would be looking at a no replacement over a long period of time, indefinite at this point. And some will say you could get a warranty for at least 50 years. That would be something we would certainly look at in the tender process. But my research tells me that there's no need for a warranty unless you do something to physically change the membrane or the stainless steel walls of that pool. It is what it is. Unless you want to go in at one day and say, hey, look, there's something changed in the market. We want to put in a bench on the side of the wall or put in a new ramp. You don't need to touch this thing. Versus if you look at a liner and the liner is put in by basically welding it or eating it up so that you seal the joins and so on. These things can break over time, and they do break. I mean, that's what happens to these systems. And what I put forward is a $3 million project, but I wanted to not to have a pool environment that's closed down right now and just do the lap pool and not finish everything that's in the area while we're at it. Because once we're in a shutdown, it's a great time, great opportunity to finish the whole thing. And we would never have to close the pool down again going into the future, and we would be flat out operation. One of the things I want to mention in terms of the 8-lane pool is scheduling. It's very, very important. It's also very, very important for the otters. Our ability to accommodate the otters in an 8-lane pool and to accommodate others in an 8-lane pool by using our schedule being a bit more flexible with our schedule is quite important. When you have a swim team in your environment that's operating at the level these guys are, they're very highly competitive. You know, they have swimmers, as Mr. Perry alluded to. You have swimmers that are at the Olympic standard. And these guys, they need a lot of water and they need a lot of training. And we need to be finding that balance, if you would, into our scheduling. And we're trying to do that almost on a daily basis. Our 8 lanes gives us more flexibility to do that. And that's something we'll work with the otters and with our own users on throughout the process. So I think the design that I put on the table, the stainless steel environment, is a more economical version, more economical structure. It's sustainable. It's all recycled material from our sustainability plan. It works really well that way as well. It's all recyclable. It's high-grade stainless steel, poly stainless steel. I did have the opportunity to go into the town of Oakville, where they're actually finishing off an installation right now. I think next week they're putting water in, so I'm going to go back down again. I did supply some pictures from that environment. Just gives you a quick overview of what stainless steel looks like. Stainless steel, of course, has been around for a long time, not just in pool environments, but certainly in other environments. So the report, I think, speaks as clearly as I can put it to you in terms of the what it would do in terms of our operation. It keeps us shut down for quite some time in order to get this job done, but I think it's needed, and we'll take the time to do what's needed. We'll go through a tender process. I didn't pick any particular brands. This is one system versus another system. It's just a covered steel versus stainless steel, poly stainless steel. And from a maintenance perspective, it works really well. One other final thing I want to discuss is that your typical traditional pool like we have now in Alder, regardless of the liner at this point, we have a square footage space of roughly maybe 1,200 to 1,400 square feet that we use for filtration room. We will go down to a third that size with this system, which makes everything else a lot cheaper to operate, more efficient to operate, less energy consumption, and it also cleans the water faster and more efficient as well. So I want to put forward that. I want to get the subject expert to do the particular tender for us and put the particular model or particular design in the tender process and move forward as quickly as possible. And in order to do that, if we can get a decision tonight, we can move forward on that. It will take at least, I'm thinking at the outside, late April before we finish it.
Okay.
And in terms of funding, I've consulted with our treasurer, and I think that's all clear there in terms of using various sources to fund the project over the next 2 years.
Very good. We have Councilors Sherwood, Andrews, Peters, and Post. In that order. Councilor Sherwood.
Yes, Your Worship, through you to Mr. Rosman. I'm going to have a couple of things, so rather than do a follow-up, I'll say both at once. I know the recommendation hasn't been read out yet, but in the recommendation, I got clarification. You're talking about it being a $3 million project, 1.7 million coming from general capital reserves, 500,000 from Parks and Rec reserves, and we had already budgeted 750,000. I'm assuming in your recommendation you're discussing about 125,000 to prepare the design. Is that coming out of one of those reserves, part of the $3 million, or is that in addition? So that's question one. You're on mute, Mr.
You're muted, sir.
I almost hit the button. Sorry, my through you, worship, to Councillor Sherwood. The thought process is that we would need 125,000, and at this point, in talking to the treasurer, we could fund the 125,000 from reserve, or we can see how we go with the tender process, and we may need an extra 125,000 above the 3 million. To be honest.
Okay, and you had a follow-up, Councillor Sherwood?
I did. So again, in your recommendation, you're not addressing what to do about Tony Rose. It's mentioned in the report about the master plan, about possibly closing it after expanding the 8-lane, the lanes at Alder. Is that discussion that will come in the future then? Because I'm concerned that if we close Alder, we close Tony Rose after expanding Alder, we still don't comply with the 3 tanks that the master plan has recommended we need for our community.
Yes, Your Worship, through the Councillor Sherwood, absolutely. The Tony Rose discussion, as you can see, the report is quite lengthy, and rather than to muddy the water and have two different projects on the table, Tony Rose is a project that stands well on its own. It's a great question. It's a question that was dealt with in the master plan and needs to go a little further. There needs to be discussion, and we need to have more open dialogue with users of that pool. When you look at it in sheer numbers, and you look at it the way the numbers are looking at in the master plan right now, in the last few years, we operate Alder, and we basically take care of the over 80% of the demand in this town through the Alder facility, and roughly 20% of the demand is being taken care of in Tony Rose. And that's with a 6-lane pool. And if we were to go to 8-lane pool, we could accommodate the demand with scheduling and so on, that we can accommodate our demand. The big question would be what you would do with a 50-year-old tank, and what you would do with Tony Rose going forward. And then the other question is anything that happens with Tony Rose infrastructure cost-wise something that should be borne solely by the town of Orangeville, or is it more of a regional approach where you would actually engage your neighbors to consider what they can do and be part of the future development of Tony Rose or like-minded facility?
Yeah, I certainly concur with Mr. Osmond that we can certainly invite our Dufferin County partners to get involved in a second pool down the road. Councillor Andrews is next, and Peters and Post. Go right ahead.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Truly appreciate the opportunity to comment and also pose a question to Mr. Osmond. First of all, Mr. Osmond, thank you very much for the detailed report, and I do mean it is an eye-opener for those of us on council. I know that on August the 5th, I happened to be fortunate enough to be in the building a day after the accident occurred, and I was more embarrassed. I was also, enormously proud of your staff who ended up having to take care of the situation, and to take a look at it firsthand, the amount of damage that occurred, and when you take a look at the lifespan of the type of liner that is currently in that particular pool, for the general public that may be viewing, and for those that may be critical in this particular decision that council have to make, unless you end up understanding the makeup of that particular pool, reserve your comment, because I feel that this is a situation that we really have to look at, not only for the short term, but the long term. I'm most appreciative of the options that you've provided in this report. My thought is that it is an expensive consideration, but one that, when you take a look at the long-term benefit, the opportunity to reduce the mechanical footprint, and the options that are presented to a fine organization like the Otters, but also to some of the other programs that exist within your programming department, I feel that the benefit is certainly there. From the perspective of installing something like this, and I know that the report does highlight this, but for the general public that may be viewing and those that may be picking this up at a later date, the impact and the timing is such that you're looking somewhere between 6 to 8 months after the tendered process and then, of course, construction. What other activity will be taking place at that particular spot at Alder for clarifications, not only for members of council, but for the general public? I know that we're talking about not only the installation of that stainless steel pool, but there's other things that you've also spoken about in your report.
Through your worship to Councillor Andrews. So what we had actually planned to do by when we started the ICIP funding application was to take a look at, if you would, to put the facility into more of a futuristic view and to put it in place to take on the future demand. So what you have is a expanded lap pool, which is the Alder main pool, lap pool, and you also have a leisure pool, which is a high demand pool. The leisure pool is used for training small kids in a smaller water environment, for mom and tot programming, for older adult programming, and as you alluded to, for therapy type of activities. We also have in that environment a slide that we do put water on to create a more of a fun environment. It's quite aged. It's been around since 2003. And what we want to do is we want to create a more exciting and more usable environment for all sorts of reasons, to engage more kids and families on the deck. And as you know, we have one of our biggest demands that we have in the summer in this community of Orangeville is splash pads. And essentially what you're trying to do is create a splash pad environment on the excess deck space, if you would, that's to the west side where the slide is now. Remove the slide, put in a play space or a what I call a wet playground, or a spray pad of sorts that takes in some other amenities, features that gives them more opportunity for kids to participate in other activities on the deck. And one other thing that came up in the master plan, and I put it in there essentially to say, okay, let's take a look at it in the tender process and see if we can afford to do it. One of the things that we're seeing a demand from based on the master plan was therapeutic. And therapeutic would be, for instance, if someone were to have knee surgery, hip surgery, any of the things that you would, or in case of anything that involves the body's muscle and body mechanics, then we would use a small space. People say it's a hot tub. No, it's not really a hot tub. It's a therapy tub or a therapy space. It's very small. It's 200 square foot space, rectangular in size, and it's designed for therapeutic reasons. That it would be actually deck itself, and would be something we would take a look at. If we don't do it now, it wouldn't be difficult to do in the long term because it's something that essentially lays on the deck. But we would like to see what the price would be at this point. If we can afford to do it, then let's try to do it at the same time.
Okay, very good.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Mr. Osmond. Three, what I hope are fairly quick and straightforward questions. First one is, with the expansion or potential expansion to 8 lanes, can you talk about the impact on the programming outside of the Otters organization? Does this improve the type and variety and capacity of our rec programming, and what might be the impact of that?
Your worship, through you to Councillor Peters, absolutely. So as I tried to allude to earlier, when you have a bigger water environment, you have the ability to cut it up in quadrants. So if you picture quadrants, we teach lessons in different quadrants in the pool based on age, based on cohort. So in the case of a 8-lane pool, it gives us the ability to do more lessons in a bigger space, A. B is it also gives us the ability to teach lessons in a pool. As an example, and I'll bring in the Otters, I don't mean to pick on them. But let's take, for instance, we had three swimmers or 4 swimmers in the Otters that needs extra time in the water. We had the ability to put those guys into 2 lanes while we have lessons going on in the other 6 lanes. We had the ability to do 4 lanes with the Otters. They only need 4 lanes. They need some extra time in the water to get ready for a major course or a major meet. We can do our lessons in 2 lanes, 3 lanes while they still continue to train in the other lap lanes. So we had the ability to give us more flexibility in the 8-lane body of water. It also gives us the ability in our future, like based on the master plan, again, we've seen a lot of this. We should keep in mind that aquatics is our largest demand program in the community. So aquatics would be, so in the case of the 8-lane pool, we're seeing a lot of fitness in the water. and aqua fitness, those kinds of things. That's expanding. We'll continue to see expansion as we age as well. We're getting more older adults that are getting in the water, and we're going to see a big increase in that as well. So the 8 lanes again gives us more flexibility to add more people in the water in shorter periods and more flexibility in our schedule.
Okay, thanks. The second one was just so we have sort of a lower threshold of the bandwidth that we're looking at here. I don't think your report included what the cost would be if we only replace the liner for the 6 lanes with stainless steel. Do you have a sense of what that value is?
If we only replace the actual 6 lanes, we're probably talking about $1 million just for the lap pool alone.
Okay.
Just the lap pool, 6 lanes, correct?
Yeah, so to establish sort of the minimum, because obviously
Right.
not having the pool is not an option. And then quickly, I wondered if further to conversations we had, you had learned any more about the potential resilience grant that was supposed to follow up the ICIP program and whether or not we might be able to get some help in that regard.
I did reach out to some government officials. I didn't get a message back. I did do some more research, and I think that this particular project would meet the criteria. So I didn't get a chance, of course, to put that in the report. I just got that today, and I'm really glad you brought it to my attention. We did look at it, of course, for the trails and so on. But in the case of a municipal facility, we could apply for this program, COVID-19 resilience grant. So it's got nothing to do with COVID. It just got to do with re-triggering major projects, get projects back on the table quickly. We're pretty much ready to go to tender and so on, but it meets the criteria. As long as we start by September 30th, 21, we can do that. So we will definitely be looking at that. And if we can get some funding through that source, then that would get things, would put us in a better position in terms of what the funding load would be on council itself or on the town itself.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, we would apply councillor grant.
Great. Councillor Post.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Osmond, most of my questions have been asked and answered. The only one that I still have left, though, is with the long time frame of having Alder back up and running, what does that do to our programming now? Is there going to be significant hits to the programs that we would typically offer, especially when I'm thinking about we're gearing back up for kids swimming lessons and all of that stuff coming off of COVID? So just wondering what those programs will look like and if there's going to be a significant impact.
Well, Your Worship, through to Councillor Post, I guess sometimes, there's good and the bad that comes out of these situations like a pandemic. In the case of this right now, we have very low numbers. You've heard me say before in council meetings and other meetings that my best guess right now, and based on we're doing budget, which is good timing, but we're working on our budget. And one of the things we're really challenged with is trying to figure out where our benchmark is right now. And our benchmark at this point is we're roughly around 30% of what we're used to in terms of demand. So we're looking at doing a budget that's going to show a gradual growth over a 2-year period and beyond, but certainly in a 2-year period. So i.e. from now this fall right into 21 and then 21 and 22. And it's a really good question because the ability for Tony Rose to accommodate that 30 to 40% that we're going to be in range-wise now is there. And that's by accommodating the otters and everybody else too. So we have the ability to do that. We may not be at the flexibility to do what we want to do in different time frames because of 2 pools and 2 locations, but we have the ability to deliver a service at a standard that we're going to be happy with over a very short to mid-term, and then what happens beyond that is we're going to Alder gets back up to speed in say mid-year next year, and we're back in business. So we see our growth, gradual growth from a business perspective, going from where we are now, around 30% roughly. And we're just introducing lessons coming up now in the next little while. And we've introduced some of our, general swims, Rick swims, those kinds of things. It's very slow. It's very slow on the uptake. And we think we're going to continue to see that. And as we evolve in the COVID environment, it's a wait and see what happens over the next month. And then we'll see where to from there. So it's a great question. But I think that Tony Rose, 6 lanes can accommodate our immediate demands right now. And certainly into early 2021.
Thank you very much for that answer. Just one really quick follow-up, if I may, Mr. Mayor, and that is, does the Tony Rose pool is the Tony Rose pool lacking anything that Alder is from a perspective of our programs? Is there any programs that we currently offer that Tony Rose just doesn't have the capacity to be able to offer, or can everything transfer over there?
No, we can transfer everything over there. It's just a matter of trying to schedule everything in.
Perfect. Thank you.
Councillor Taylor. You're muted, sir.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Mr. Osmond, for your deep dive into the pool. Yeah, I could not resist. I know. I guess
Put
for
that on
me,
your calendar, Councillor Taylor.
as I think about this situation we're in, it really feels like we've got a gun to the ear on this one. There really isn't a lot of options in my mind as we go forward. And to me, I mean, if this was your business or your home, it's pretty hard to make half a decision, and half a decision is to stay status quo and replace a liner that's not adequate and doesn't work. And this has been there for quite some time for people who aren't aware of the history. It was a beautiful decision made by a council way back in the day, in my view, to build that arena. I think it's a wonderful building. Unfortunately, I think a mistake was made with the pool way back in the day, and we have an opportunity to rectify that here. I think what gives me great, and I guess I'm speaking to council now, what gives me great concern is the money that's associated with this, the $3 million. And then, you know, Mr. Osmond, you answer things with such authority and have such a believable report, and yet, you know, I feel like there might be cost overruns here, and you really haven't hid from that either. So I think we're probably talking a greater than a $3 million decision, but what do we do other than go forward with that decision? For me, and I've been asking Mr. Perry and listening closely to Mr. Osmond, I really do see Tony Rose tied to this. I agree there isn't much sense in making a decision today on where we're going to go, but I'd be hard pressed to spend additional money after this on swimming. Like, I just don't know how we would do it. And obviously it's a holistic discussion, which we'll have to have. But today we're 3.3 million. That really we have no other decision in my mind but to go forward. So it's a shame, really.
Okay, Deputy Mayor McIntosh.
Thank you. Thank you, Worship. I'd like to make a motion that we accept the recommendations in the report.
Right. Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Taylor. Before we vote, I just want to make another comment. Councillor, if you remember, Councillor Peters made a suggestion back when we were looking at the roof of the SPCA building on Riddell, and it was about longevity, and it was about making a decision for the long term for council benefits down the road, not necessarily for our budgeting purposes, but it was a wise decision. And I think this particular decision, if we move ahead to vote and move ahead with that 3 million, is that same kind of decision, because when we look at the cost of replacing vinyl over the next 30 years, it's going to eclipse the cost of this renovation today. And, you know, obviously correcting, as Councillor Taylor has said, correcting the budget trimming that happened in 2002 to go down to 6 lanes is an important thing, and it gives the auditors so much more fundraising capability, and the economic spin-off of having sport tourism in our town is there as well. So I know where I'm voting. So is there any further comment? Councillor Sherwood and then Councillor Peters. Go right ahead. Councillor Sherwood, you're muted.
Sorry, my mouse decided to fly away on me. So just to be clarify, in the recommendation, we're still not approving the type of pool. We're just getting the money parked in the bank account and getting ready and preparing a design. We're still not approving that part of it, correct? And
I'll leave that to Mr. Osmond.
Like, because in your recommendation, nowhere is there saying what kind of pool we're putting in.
Stainless steel, I believe, was the
It's not in the recommendation though, right?
Okay, Mr. Osmond, can you clarify?
Well, for clarity, the council approved capital funding in the amount of $3 million for the replacement and expansion of 6 and 25 meter lap pool to a 8-lane replacement of a leisure liner to a poly stainless steel system.
Okay, all right. So now my next concern, I want to go back to my original question about the $125,000. where's, I would like that money to come out of this 3 million and not be in addition to the 3 million. And then if we're short, you can come back and ask for more. So in the recommendation, it's still not being told, I'm still not clear on where that funding's coming from, because I'm almost thinking now by this, the way it's written, we're approving 3,125,000.
I believe that's what Mr. Osmond did say earlier, that the 125 may be extra. Correct?
But coming from where? How's that being funded?
Okay, Ms. Syed, I see your hand up. Would you like to weigh in, please?
Thank you, Worship. So through your Worship to Council, the 125 can be accommodated through our general capital reserves. As Council is aware, and through Mr. Osmond's report, we do have 8.4 million in that reserves currently, which is inclusive of 2.3 million surplus that came out of our 2019 year. So that can be accommodated through that reserves.
Okay. Was it Councillor Peters? Did you have your hand up as well? Sorry, Councillor Peters.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just one clarification through you to Mr. Osmond, and then I guess some commentary. Mr. Osmond, could you clarify just the extent of work? I mean, going to 8 lanes is going to involve changes to the footprint, the structure, the facade, the landscaping, right? I don't think the capacity is there to include all 8 lanes within the existing footprint. Is that all rolled into the cost?
The 8-lane expansion is internal to the building, so the 8-lane expansion would basically go to the north side, if you would, towards the dressing rooms. Would leave us it'll be a smaller deck space, but not a deck space is not big enough. It would be big enough to accommodate our needs, and we would actually put in the 8 lanes, and the ramp would be on the dressing room side.
Okay,
no changes to the building itself, the structure of the building.
All right, thanks for that clarification. And then I guess just my thoughts on this. I mean, we heavily debated $1 million for Harvey Curry Park and some upgrades there. And while this report is very comprehensive, you know, we're looking at half of the Parks and Rec reserves and a quarter of the general capital on a single project. And I still wholly support the long-term vision and want to do it right if we're going to do it. I look at the size of this and the other things we have on our plate without the guarantee of a grant, with things like a fire hall looming over us. And, you know, I don't know. We have to fix the liner in that pool 100%. But the numbers are also down at the moment. So I don't know if that buys us a little bit of time. I'd love to see where the grant information comes, you know, before we jump with 2 feet here, because it's a huge price tag. And I understand the long-term implications, but I also worry that a decision to expand Alder is an implicit decision to close Tony Rose, which, you know, I don't think we're ready for that discussion yet. So those are my thoughts.
Okay, well, I believe we have a motion on the floor right now. So is there any further comments before we vote on that motion? Seeing none. So the motion is to accept the recommendation of town staff and to move ahead with the stainless steel and the expansion of the pool. All in favor? We have 5 and opposed. We have Peters and Sherwood opposed. So that motion passes. Okay, thank you everyone, and let's hope that Mr. Osmond can work on a grant and that we can take advantage of that in the near future. Thank you. Okay, moving along.
Everyone, I'll leave your meeting now.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Perry.
Worship.
Yes, go right ahead. Yes, thank you, Andrew. Okay, Ms. Landry, did we get Ms. Hayes on the line? Dan, did you want to make a comment here on our technical issues tonight?
Sure, thank you. Through you, your worship, we are experiencing an issue right now on the Eastern Canadian data center for Microsoft Teams. The phone-in numbers, none of them are working. They're just dialing and not accepting any calls. So that being said, we will be unable to have people. We will be unable to have Ms. Hayes call in as well as anybody for question period. So what we have done to help mitigate that, or hopefully to help resolve that, is if anyone does have a question for question period, if they could email them to klandry@orangeville.ca, KLANDRY@orangeville.ca. We'll try and do it that way for tonight.
Prior to 8:30, I believe. Is that, we've got 10 minutes for people to send in their questions to Ms. Landry, and we will deal with them at question period. Okay, so moving along to item 12.2. This is a recommendation that reports CPS TF 2020-05 dated September 14th with respect to section 357 and 358 property tax adjustments for 2017, 18, 19, and 20 be received, and that council authorizes reduction in property tax totaling $64,840.20. Can we have a motion to accept this recommendation? Councillor Post. We have a seconder for that.
Your worship, I will.
Councillor Sherwood. Before we vote, any comments from any councillors on this item? Seeing none, all in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. 12.2 passes unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to 12.3. This is a recommendation that reports CPS CL 2020-023 regarding electronic participation and proxy voting be received, and that staff bring forward a bylaw to amend bylaw 064-2017, being a bylaw to govern the proceedings of council and its committees to provide for electronic participation and proxy voting for members of council for council consideration and approval. Ms. Landry, I wonder if you can just give us a brief background of how you put this together.
Sure. Okay. So the report is responding to council's request with respect to facilitating electronic participation in a council meeting. It's also responding to the changes in the legislation as it relates to the ability to have completely electronic meetings moving forward. Also, with the changes that recently came through from the provincial government, it's addressing the ability to facilitate proxy voting. So in summary, and looking at it in three parts, electronic participation, we're recommending that be included in the procedural bylaw. And we are recommending that the previous provision that was contained in the provincial legislation that required a quorum of members would have to be physically present in the chambers be carried through into the procedural bylaw itself. So in other words, if anyone wanted to participate electronically, assuming we're back in normal circumstances, we could do so up to a maximum of 3 members of council at any given time. We also set the framework for advising the clerk's department or clerk's division when you want to participate electronically, indicating that you have to give 72 hours notice, and then we will facilitate the electronic participation. That's the electronic participation part. Then there's the part for a fully electronic meeting, which we're currently dealing with and having this evening. So provisions within the bylaw establish that we can have fully electronic meetings during an emergency that's been declared either provincially or by the town of Orangeville itself. Also, if there are extenuating circumstances as it relates to public health concerns. So we've established that at any time, when those circumstances exist, we can move to a fully electronic meeting. And then there's a third part of the report and the bylaw that we're dealing with as it just relates to it, given their current circumstances, because typically I think we would all agree that an emergency, we haven't seen an emergency declared for such a long period in our history. And we recognize that the recovery period for the COVID-19 pandemic is going to be for a significant period of time. And we don't know exactly what the circumstances are going to be over the course of the next year. So we've included a provision that recognizes our current circumstances and allows us the flexibility to move between perhaps a fully electronic meeting, what I'm going to call a hybrid meeting, where perhaps some members of council are able to be present in the council chambers. And then also, if we're able to go back to fully meetings that are taking place fully within the council chambers, then we can do that. And that provision is going to be in place for a year after the declared emergency has ended. And then I guess the fourth part has to do with the new proxy provisions that have been introduced by the provincial government that allow municipal councils to include in their procedural bylaw the ability for proxy voting. So we've established a framework for proxy voting. However, as a member, if you're wanting to appoint someone as a proxy, you will be required to first indicate on a prescribed form that you're not able to be physically present, and also the fact that you won't be able to participate electronically. So you're just basically making that declaration that, one, you can't be present in the chambers and you can't participate electronically. And there may very well be circumstances where a council member is faced with that in the case of a potential illness, anything of that nature. In that, we've also indicated clearly that within those proxy voting parameters, that if you're on parental or on a parental leave, you can also exercise the right to appoint a proxy. I guess one of the other main things with respect to proxy voting is the fact that you have to, at that time, when the agenda is released, you have to indicate whether you have a pecuniary interest in a matter and file the appropriate form, which you're accustomed to doing right now. And you cannot appoint a proxy until the actual agenda is released, because therefore you cannot indicate to the person that you're appointing as a proxy how to vote. And I think with respect to proxy voting, the other parameters that were put in place that legislatively is that you can revoke the proxy at any time before the meeting. And also the person that's appointed as a proxy can say that they no longer want to act on the other member's behalf. The other thing that I would point out with respect to proxy voting essentially is that we've done, I think you have to, with the proxy voting, I think it's important to just also note that a member can either act as a proxy when they're participating electronically or they're actually in the room. Okay, so if I'm going to take Councillor Post because I can see her on the screen right at the moment. If she appoints Councillor Peters and Councillor Peters is participating electronically and wants to appoint him as a proxy, that is okay. It's permitted. And essentially with proxy voting, I think, Mr. Mayor, that's the main provisions as it relates to proxy voting.
All right, Madam Clerk, thank you so much. We have some councillors who are weighing in here, Councillor Taylor and Councillor Sherwood, and we also have McIntosh and Post. Councillor Taylor, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. You know, as someone who moves about the country.
Go right ahead.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. As someone who moves about the country on occasion, sometimes meetings. It's all right. It's just maybe that's better. It's difficult at times to make all of the meetings. Council meetings aside, committee meetings can be difficult, especially as we become more and more involved in these meetings. And I guess I bring my question to item 6 on page 5, bullet 2. And it just speaks to the fact that the secretary and the chair must be physically present at each meeting location. I wish that wasn't in there. I think we've proven through COVID that we can manage meetings and chair through this device. I think about police service board meetings and how that has gone on, and with commuting and whatnot as we get back to normalcy. You know, I would prefer to have that option still, to be in a different location than the committee. And if I was so fortunate to be chair of to chair that remotely, and I just don't understand the rationale for that, and would prefer it wasn't there. So perhaps through you, Your Worship, to Ms. Landry, is there a potential to have that struck or provide the rationale for it, or perhaps different wording, something along those lines?
Madam clerk.
Councillor Taylor, to respond to your question, with respect to the mayor or the chair being present in the meeting, that has to do when we're dealing with what I'm going to term as electronic participation meetings. So it's actually when there's a quorum present in the room, the chair is to be present. When we're dealing with fully electronic meetings, we encourage that the mayor and the chair is present. However, there is the ability to do it remotely, but that just needs to be noted on the agenda at the time that the agenda is produced.
So if I may, Your Worship, through you to Ms. Landry, I guess to me, I think it's prohibitive. Like I prefer that be struck entirely. I still think we could run a meeting. We've proven that we can. I just don't understand the rationale for it. Like you're telling me it has to be done, but I'd love to have that taken out of this document.
I think you have, the only thing that I would point out, Councillor Taylor, is if you're in what I'm going to call the hybrid situation, which is just electronic participation only, you have to remember that you actually have a quorum of members of council present in the room at the time, and you're also facilitating people delegating in person. So to have the chair participate remotely, I think just makes it a bit more cumbersome in terms of carrying out the process of the meeting. Whereas whether you're all electronic, when you're all electronic, it's easier to facilitate everyone being off-site, and no one is physically present in the room.
So Your Worship, I apologize. One last one, if I could. If this is a council meeting we're talking about, I'm completely aligned to what you're saying, Ms. Landry. It says committees. So for committees, like I just don't see the need to do that. I'd prefer that we struck it. But if for council, I mean, clearly the mayor should be in the room. He or she has duties that need to be performed in front of the public, that sort of thing. But for a committee meeting, I think it would be more efficient for everyone if we could have that chair be able to be remotely as well.
Okay, let's hear from all the councillors. Councillor Taylor, and then if you want to make some sort of friendly amendment once we've spoken, we'll revisit that. If that's okay.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, Your Worship. I'm wondering if we could make a slight change to the recommendation as read, and if we could separate out the report regarding and the vote regarding electronic participation and proxy voting. If we could do those separately, only because I'm in favor of the electronic participation. I'm not in favor of the proxy voting. So the way it's written, I would have to vote against everything, even though there's some that I'm for. My position about the proxy voting is we knew when we were running that we were committed as a member of council, knowing that that commitment requires us to attend in person, being in person in the chambers or in person virtually here. And I think to vote in total absence, to me, it's not that transparency that I set up in my accountability that I signed up for. So I would wonder if we could vote on those separately in the recommendation.
Okay. Again, let's revisit that once we hear from all the councillors. Councillor Sherwood, I will call on both you and Councillor Taylor at the end of the discussion. Deputy Mayor McIntosh.
Thank you, Your Worship. I actually don't like any of it. I understand why, because of the situation we're in, but I can just see if everything is in a perfect world, people can abuse this. I go back to the police decision. That night was horrible. I would have just given Deb my proxy and not showed up. I can just see abuse. Like, you know, people will constantly use it and not be in chambers. It's as you know, and we all know, it's a whole different feeling when you're in chambers facing the public. By doing this, we're not facing the public. We're not being accountable to them. We're just a face, and I can see it could be abused. That's all I'm worried about. You know, in times like this, absolutely, we have no choice. We've got to do it. But when we're back to normal, I just don't like it.
Can I ask Madam Clerk here, is this specific to, is this going to expire a year out from the end of the emergency order? This is going to be fixed by law forever. Okay. Council can always amend it, of course. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Deputy Mayor McIntosh. Councillor Post.
I have similar concerns, so thank you for bringing that up. My other question is actually on page 10 of the report, and it's in regards to committees, talking about meetings for committees to remain fully electronic. And I'm in support of that, especially with where we're at right now in the world. The question and concern that I have right now is that one of my committees, specifically the Joint Accessibility Committee, we had our very first meeting at the beginning of September since COVID has happened. And what we found is that our accessibility committee is not very accessible to the people who need it the most because of the electronic participation. So well, it does. We've got special needs on that committee who require, who have difficulty either with hearing or with seeing, where doing it electronically just unfortunately isn't working. It's not accessible. So with this, with the way that it's worded right now, it does say that meetings are to remain fully electronic for committees. Is there any leeway in that for partially hybrid solution where perhaps a few of us could be in a room in order to facilitate making sure that all of our members' voices are being heard? Because that was definitely a challenge, and maybe it's looking at outside technology that we can look at a little differently, and that can be an offside conversation out of this, but that part does concern me as well.
Madam Clerk.
To respond to Councillor Post, of course, we can look at anything that we can do to accommodate to ensure that the member can participate. All we will need to do is make sure that we have the appropriate meeting accommodations and are able to ensure that there is physical distancing involved. But certainly we can look at the options both from a technological and an environment where we could perhaps have a few members in so that that particular committee can continue to meet with the participation of all its members.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Andrews.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. And again, I just wanted to piggyback on Councillor Post's point, as I also chair a committee which has a variety of members who are within the business community and who are in fact traveling even during these COVID times. And the electronic option certainly has benefited our upcoming meeting, which is being held later this month. But there will be a point in time where we do have that opportunity to have robust discussion on site. And so I think a hybrid version would be beneficial. And I think inclusion of that within the document is very important. So thank you, Councillor Post, for bringing that up too as well.
Okay. Any further comments before we move this forward? Okay. So Councillor Taylor, your friendly amendment, if you could recap that for us.
I would allow committee chairs to access remotely. I guess that's as succinct as I could be. So I would change the second bullet in item 6 on page 5 to read that committee chairs and secretaries could also access remotely for committees.
Okay. Do we have a seconder to that friendly amendment? Councillor Peters? Councillor Peters. Okay, so Madam Clerk, we will vote on that amendment to be included. All right, all in favor of that amendment being included?
Yes.
That's great. Thank you, everyone.
Any opposed? Deputy Mayor McIntosh is opposed. Councillor Andrews, you were for that amendment?
Yes, I was. I did. Yes, I was.
So yeah. Deputy Mayor McIntosh is the only one in opposition. And then Councillor Sherwood, can you rehash what you had mentioned earlier?
Yes, Your Worship. In the opening line of the recommendation, it says that report CPS CL 2020-023 regarding electronic participation and proxy voting be received. I would like that to be split out in separate votes, please.
Okay.
Do I have a seconder?
Pardon me.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that.
Okay. Right. So under the second recommendation, that's where the vote should be split then. I've just been advised by our town clerk.
Under the second recommendation, I'm sorry, where's that?
Which page is that on? Yes, I'm going to have our clerk read this to you. Right ahead.
So rather than split the recommendation as it relates to receipt of the report, my suggestion is that you just call a separate vote on the bylaw and deal with the component as it relates to electronic participation first to be included in the bylaw, and then the second part as it relates to proxy voting.
So then we're voting at that later then?
No, we're going to deal with it right now. But so Councillor Sherwood, that's what you requested, correct?
Yes, I believe I did have a seconder on the floor for that. That's what I was requesting.
Do we have a seconder there?
Yes.
Councillor Andrews is seconding that. Okay, so we need to pass that as a friendly amendment to this. So all in favor of splitting the vote? No?
Yes.
Is that?
No.
You don't have to. Okay, excuse me. All right.
We're new.
We're new. Okay, so let's move ahead then. So we have decided that this will be voted in two parts. So the electronic participation component of this bylaw, all in favor?
Yes. Can you hang on one sec, Mr. Mayor, on that one?
Okay.
Do we need to add in the portion that myself and Councillor Andrews had spoken about the electronic meetings in committees before we vote on that, about having a hybrid solution? Can that wording be added before we vote to approve that electronic participation piece?
Madam Clerk.
If I may, the bylaw actually allows us to facilitate that. What you were reading at the end with respect to the recovery period, Councillor Post, is just how we intended to proceed. And certainly we can have the flexibility to move to a physical environment as the conditions dictate. And we will move forward with respect to your particular concerns as it relates to the accessibility committee and ensuring that we're able to allow that member to participate. But there isn't a need to actually change the motion that's on the floor.
Okay, excellent. That was my question. Thank you.
Councillor Peters.
Thanks. So to be clear, the first motion would be to receive the report and vote on the electronic portion?
Correct.
Okay, if so, I'll move that.
Okay. All right, so that's been moved, seconded by Councillor Taylor. All in favor of the first part of this recommendation?
Yes.
Opposed? Yes. Opposed. Deputy Mayor McIntosh is opposed. Now moving on to part two, which is the proxy portion of this recommendation. May we have a motion on that? Councillor Peters, seconded by Councillor Sherwood. All in favor? To not include the proxies?
Yeah, what are you voting on?
Yeah,
Councillor Peters, I'm sorry, it was your motion, sir. What did you want to?
I was following the staff recommendation to put the motion to implement the proxy procedures.
Right.
So this isn't, you're asking for it to be in favor of proxy voting?
Right.
I'm going along with the recommendation as written, yes.
Yes, okay. Okay, so Councillor Sherwood, you're opposed to this, I believe.
Right.
You're removing your second of that motion, correct?
I didn't second that emotion.
Oh, I thought you did.
Oh, I did?
Yeah.
No, I don't.
Okay.
I'm opposed.
May we have a seconder for Councillor Peters' motion? Councillor Taylor, and this is to allow for proxy voting in both committee and council meetings, correct? Okay, those, just council.
Just council.
Excuse me, just council. All in favor? We have Peters, Taylor, and Brown in favor. Is that correct? And opposed? We have Andrews, Post, McIntosh, and Sherwood opposed. So that we have defeated that. So there you go. Proxy voting will not be permitted. Okay, let's carry on. Okay, moving on to correspondence. So we have a number of pieces of correspondence to receive, including a note from the town of Mono regarding investment in rural broadband. We also have a note from our MP, Kyle Seaback, again referencing broadband as an essential service. We have an item from Township of East Garifraxa, a passing of a zoning bylaw amendment, and additional correspondence from Dufferin County regarding their diversity training program. May I have a motion to receive this correspondence? Councillor Post, seconded by Councillor Taylor. All in favor?
Yes.
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 We have committee board meetings. Again, this is the Committee of Adjustment minutes from the July the 8th, 2020 meeting. And we have Orangeville Police Service Board minutes from the meetings of April 21st, May 19th, June 16th, and July 21st of 2020. May I have a motion to receive those minutes? Deputy Mayor McIntosh, Councillor Sherwood, any discussion on those matters?
I have a question.
Councillor Andrews.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. This is very quick to Councillor Taylor, who's also the chair of the Police Board. I did read all of the minutes from the Police Board. Noted in the July 21st minutes that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the composition of the current board will remain the same. But through consultation, or have you had consultation with the OPP regarding the structure of board governance? Does it change in any way, shape, and form? And will there be any requirements for any of the board members to go through some specific training?
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Councillor Andrews, for your question. Yes, we will be changing the designation of our board. We go from a Section 10 board to a board that has, less influence involvement overall. We have upcoming, there is a meeting with the Midland chair of their board, who is educating us on, I guess, the process that took place from Midland's own police force to their OPP. And I guess all of us are going to have to learn what those new requirements are. There is certainly responsibility set out in the Act. I would be
we lost you there, Councillor Taylor.
We
could you back up a couple of 30 seconds there, Councillor Taylor? We lost your feed there.
Okay. What was the last thing you heard? I'm sorry.
Well, that you had invited the chair of Midland Police in.
Thank you. So the
service board in, I should say.
Yeah, the current chair of the Midland Police Services Board will speak to us on the experiences that Midland had moving from a Midland police force to an OPP police force. And we basically mentoring us on what those changes were, because at this point we don't know what we don't know, and there is learnings to occur. I would expect, my feeling is as though even though we transition to a new board, same people, but a new board makeup, I think we still have some work to do as we close up the books on Orangeville Police Service. We are making tremendous progress with that. There's some legal items that are confidential that are still ongoing, but I would anticipate those would wrap up. And I would hope as we get into November that most of those OPS issues are resolved and we're simply onto the OPP. We've also had members of the OPP come to our meeting, and they have educated us as well, and they will be working very closely with Orangeville, the town of Orangeville, moving forward with the OPP. And then the last piece is we've had Ms. McKinney and Mr. Brennan instrumental in helping us to understand what the implications are of the contract. We have made tremendous progress with that contract. We recently went to arbitration and had an award that was given to OPS, and we're just finalizing that now. So I think a lot of the pieces are falling into place, but there's a few loose ends, Councillor Andrews, that are just kind of hanging out there, and we're kind of scurrying around in a planful manner, trying to ensure that we're tying everything with a red bow and welcoming OPP in a classy way that the town of Orangeville wants to start with them. And I guess, Your Worship, if I could, I wanted to make a statement too. And the piece to my fellow councillors is when I look at these meeting minutes that you're receiving tonight, they are dated, and they're a source of consternation for myself and, Mayor Brown as well, who's a member of the board. We have had issues. They were difficult to bring forward in the fashion that they are. So they took an exorbitant amount of time, which is completely unacceptable. And I take responsibility for that. But the reality is they are here today, and we are up to date on meeting minutes to council at this point. But it has been a bit of a struggle for a variety of reasons.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. So I think we were about to vote on receiving of these minutes. We did have a motion, did we not? Yeah. Okay, who made the motion? Can somebody refresh? All right, let's try it. Deputy Mayor, you're muted, sir.
I think it might have been me. I'm not
Right.
sure. That was so long ago.
All right. Let's go with Deputy Mayor McIntosh, and the seconder will be Councillor Peters.
Councillor Sherwood. Councillor
We
Sherwood.
got Peters. Okay, we got McIntosh and Peters. All in favor of
Yes.
receiving these minutes?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, moving along to item 15. This is a notice of motion prior to meeting by Councillor Sherwood. Councillor Sherwood, would you like to speak to this?
Yes, Your Worship. Ironically, just recently I had a Zoom call with up to the North Pole with Santa Claus's booking agent, and she told me that Santa was really anxious to come to our community if we so see fit that we could get something together. I think he would love to make an appearance. So having said that, I wanted to bring a motion to my fellow councillors, whereas council was recently advised that the King Club has withdrawn from organizing the 2020 Santa Claus Parade due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the inability to obtain insurance for hosting a parade during this time. And whereas town council wishes to consider the options and costs associated with hosting and organizing a drive-by Santa Claus event in November 2020. Now, therefore, be it resolved that council hereby directs staff to report back on the options of hosting and organizing a drive-by Santa Claus event in November 2020 in accordance with public health guidelines, requirements, and the associated costs.
Thank you, Councillor Sherwood. Councillor Andrews.
I'd like to support that. I want to be in Santa's good books this Christmas. So please consider this as an endorsement to that particular motion.
Very good. Any other comments from councillors? Councillor Post and Councillor Peters.
Yes, I think Councillor Peters was actually ahead of me, so go ahead.
I'm sorry. Here, his hand is out of. Yeah, very good. Go ahead, Councillor Peters.
Thanks. Yeah. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Sherwood, I understand sort of the impetus to have the drive-by event given the recent situation and the way events are going, but I prefer not to limit staff's investigation to just the drive-by event and see if it is at all possible to have a traditional event with some kind of spacing, and maybe that's not possible, but I wouldn't want to eliminate that from consideration by staff. So I wonder if Councillor Sherwood would be open to that.
Yes, Your Worship, I would definitely be open to that if that is something that the staff can also report on, whether it be drive-by or the traditional means.
So,
as long as we're following the public health guidelines, but I know staff will look into that.
Okay, so Madam Clerk, if we could just make an amendment there, the staff will also look at the possibilities of traditional parade with people standing on the sidewalk and walking to the parade route. Thank you, Councillor Peters and Councillor Sherwood. Councillor Post.
I love this idea. Now, I do have a couple of questions, though, so through you, perhaps to Mr. Brennan. This is kind of falling directly through our budget time and all of those good things. So is this a feasible thing for town staff to be working on? How much of a hindrance will this be from a work perspective? And I only ask that as a community organizer. I know how difficult and how much work goes into event organizing like this. And have we talked to any other service clubs to see if they have a desire, if it's just a drive-by event and there's not necessarily insurance issues or anything like that, or any of the other service clubs in the community willing to take it on? I would just absolutely hate to burden town staff with something like that, because I do know that it is such a huge endeavor to go into. Definitely worth investigating, but just curious, Mr. Brennan, what your perspective is on this at this point, and timing wise as well.
Your Worship, through you, of course, I'm always concerned with the workload of staff. It's been a very busy year, and staff has done a lot of work, a lot of extra work to get us through this COVID, and as we continue on with the normal business of the town. I have spoke to Mr. Osmond, and he's aware of this, so he is telling me that he's more than willing to check into it, him and his staff. It'd be a great thing if we can pull it off in the rules and guidelines of public health and our officials. If we are feeling any problems of following through on the full study, then we will certainly come back to council. But at this stage, and we will reach out to some of our other groups as well, if we can make this work. So we're hoping to have a quick summary of this done and back to council early enough so that we can get plans in place for November timelines, if that is possible.
That is fantastic to hear. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
I'm very supportive of your motion, Councillor Sherwood.
I was at the at Metro on Saturday as a Lions Club member. We were doing a bit of a food drive there, and I did mention this to this year's president, Chris McBride, that Lions Club may be able to help out with this. It'll be a club decision, and it's something I'm going to bring forward at the next meeting. So I hope we can get some help from the Lions Club. And Councillor Sherwood and I have been, talking and emailing with Cindy Williams of the Kin Club. I believe she said 20 volunteers on the day of the event. Is that correct, Councillor Sherwood?
Yes, Your Worship, and the Kin Club themselves were really dwindling down to about 10 volunteers. So they always relied on outside people to assist anyway. But they have offered to assist not as kins, but as volunteers.
Right.
Some of them.
Right. So I hope I'm sure we can get the requisite volunteers together. So very good. Okay. Any Councillor Taylor, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. So I want to be true to myself, and I think, if, in all honesty, I voted incorrectly last time we went through this as a group for a community event. I voted yes, simply out of respect for yourself, Your Worship, and to be along with the team. I mean no disrespect to you, Councillor Sherwood. I don't think this is a good idea. I think that we should be falling back. These are events that are normally run by community groups, not by the town of Orangeville. I don't think that we should be allowing our staff to be taking their eye off of the tasks that they have on hand. And I would prefer that service clubs run these items. And not be.
You
I'm going to vote
again, Councillor Taylor. We lost you again there. Sorry.
Okay, but and the gist of it is, I will be voting no on this initiative. Thank you.
Yeah, my understanding is that the problem with the Kin Club was insurance, and that they weren't able to. So Councillor Sherwood has asked staff to investigate whether the town's umbrella insurance policy can handle an event like this. So, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes. We'll see how the vote goes as well. Okay, any further comment on this before we vote on this? No, seeing none. Okay, so Councillor Sherwood has this motion on the table. Seconder for this?
I've already seconded.
Oh, Councillor Andrews. Okay, all in favor?
Yes.
And opposed? Councillor Taylor. Okay, very good. All right, moving along. Any notices of motion at the meeting, councillors? Seeing none. Any new business, councillors? Here we go. Okay, I got Andrews, Post, McIntosh. Go right ahead, Councillor Andrews.
Thank you. It's been some time since our last meeting, so it gives us an opportunity to wave the flag on certain things. But as was discussed earlier about electronic participation, I would like to, and again, as it's identified in our upcoming minutes for the Business Economic Development Advisory Committee, we have a meeting coming up on the 22nd of September at 8:30 in the morning. There is an opportunity for the general public to participate, if I'm correct in saying so. And a couple of items that will be discussed, one of which will be the tourism strategy and action plan, as well as the COVID recovery response of the town's BDAC, and more importantly, the Economic Development Office has led in many different ways, as well as town staff. As Mr. Brennan has talked about this, the town staff have been exemplary during the COVID process that we've had to go through. And again, kudos to the EDC office, which, as you recall, Your Worship, there were a variety of different activities that were developed to assist the business community. So this is just an opportunity to hear a little bit more on where the recovery is. And as we do have some businesses that are moving ahead with some new openings and hopefully some positive recovery.
Very good. Thank you. I've got Councillor Post, Deputy Mayor McIntosh, Councillor Peters. Councillor Post, go right ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick update for Council. I've been working alongside the DCCRC towards their march that they're having for missing and murdered Indigenous women on Sunday, October 4th. So just this past week, Councillor Taylor, as chair of the Police Services Board, and some members of the OPP met with Mr. Jones and myself and members of the DCCRC just to go over some of their parameters around this walk that they're planning. There is no requirement for council to approve a road closure because their intent is to have a rolling closure. But I just wanted to make council aware that on Sunday, October 4th, there will be a rolling road closure starting at the courthouse on Zina, which is where they are meeting at between 10 and 10:30 in the morning for an 11 o'clock walk, where they will be leaving and up First Street and then down Broadway eastbound towards Alexandra Park, where they will be finishing. So there will be a little bit of a delay in traffic there on that Sunday morning, but it will be a very quick walk, and it will be a rolling closure that the OPP is prepared to take on for us. So again, that's Sunday, October 4th, and all members of council are invited to participate. It's a very important walk for missing and murdered Indigenous women. And on that note, from the DCCRC as well, they have moved their Indigenous Persons Day celebrations that normally would have happened back in June. They've moved them virtual, and they're actually happening as a live celebration of fall this coming Saturday, September 19th. All of the event is going to be live on their Facebook page between 1 and 3. So if you jump on and support that event as well. Is there any questions about the walk? Does anybody have any questions or concerns? Excellent. That's all I've got then. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Post, Deputy Mayor McIntosh.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to shout out congratulations to yourself on the very successful summer concert series that we just recently had. I know council supported it, but it was totally your vision that brought it to fruition. So congratulations.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, it turned out quite well, and I really have to take my hat off to town staff and Music 21 who put the production together, and of course our fabulous local musicians who helped us to start to forget about COVID as much as we can. But it turned out well. So thank you, Deputy Mayor McIntosh. Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just for the benefit of council and anyone in the public. The Sustainable Orangeville Committee has been getting things ramped up a little bit again, and as you'll remember, we missed Earth Week. That was very shortly after the state of emergency was declared. But happy to report we're partnering with the Rotary Club to bring back Make Orangeville Shine. and that'll be this Saturday. No gathering, no barbecue, but encourage to sign up using the Literati app, and we'll track all the trash that's picked up and report back to everybody on that. So glad that we won't miss that event for this year. And then 2 other notes: the environmental awards that would have been given back in Earth Week, nominations have reopened for that, so that we can give those out in mid-October, and that will correspond with a tree planting event. Credit Valley Conservation has rewritten their guidelines for those events and their safety protocols, and we'll be planting at Every Kids Park, just near where all the renovations were done, filling in some of that area. So I'm very pleased to see some of those events coming back to the community, and obviously we'll build on those for the future.
Very good. Thank you. Councillors, any further new business to discuss? Seeing none, we'll move on to question period. Madam Clerk, did we receive any questions?
You gonna mute?
Sorry, go right ahead.
Okay, we have received one question. I will read it, and it's from Shirley Ramsey. I would like to make a few comments in relation to the portion of the meeting dealing with aquatics that I was unable to listen to. The Otters are a very, or that I was able to listen to, sorry. The Otters are a very successful organization, and we want them to continue to be successful. The benefits to the town and participants are obvious, but swimming is as well a life skill and physical activity for all people. There is a large variety of aquatic programs that benefit the residents of Orangeville. I'd like to make the point that we're very lucky to have a second pool right now for everybody's sake. I'd also like to make the point that some people prefer learning and teaching in a smaller environment such as Tony Rose. There is much less echo effect in a smaller place and fewer distractions for children learning to swim. Others do not like the fishbowl environment of a large facility. I would like to suggest there is a pent-up demand for aquatic activities at any time, since parents do pursue lessons outside the town programs. Right now, aquafit classes are waitlisted for examples. Would Mr. Osmond please speak again about the reasons for the ventilation problems at Tony Rose? The audio was not clear, and what parts I did catch, I did not clearly understand. The ventilation has been a problem for a long time, I understand. Thank you very much, Shirley Ramsey.
Mr. Osmond?
There you go.
You're off.
Your worship.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Osmond.
If I could make a quick comment, yes. Well, first off, as I said earlier, the Tony Rose facility was built some years ago, and the system that was put in, and we've made attempts to update it over the years, but the fresh air handling system right now is not large enough to give us enough turnover in fresh air in the facility in the space that we have. And the way our exhaust system works is that the exhaust is higher up, is not down low to the pool deck. So you have a very confined space. So your ceiling is low. And your walls are narrow. So you have a very confined space in order to try to get air circulation to be maintained. And what happens when you deal with chloramines, or a lot of people in the water, is that everybody basically you have things come off the human body that create a chemical reaction, and we call it chloramines. And chloramines is created when you have chlorine in the water that mix with these things off of your body, and so on and so forth, without getting into the detail. And what you would do in a newer facility is you would have enough air capacity, and you have enough system to suck all that poor air off the water level, that 12 inches I referred to earlier. And Tony Rose can't do that. We don't have a system in Tony Rose large enough to do that. In order to make the changes in Tony Rose to improve the air quality, is not just about the mechanical system. It's also about the physical infrastructure of that space that we need to deal with. And if we were to redesign a rectangular pool today, we would actually design it so that the actual suction power, if you would, or the exhaust power, if you would, to take the chloramines off the water, would be actually built at deck level. And that's simply a matter of technology, and that's simply a matter of being in the year 2020 versus being back 47 or 48 years ago when you didn't have that capacity. And you have a pretty good air quality in Tony Rose if you got small numbers in the pool. So as an example, as alluded to by the questioner, Ms. Ramsey, if you only have 20 people in doing a fitness exercise in a pool, you will not create enough problem in terms of the air quality just from that. But if you have 40 or 50 people in the pool swimming on a continuous basis for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, air quality creates problems with your breathing in the water and with lungs and so on. So that's just the nature of a physical structure that we have to work with and try to improve the air quality as much as possible with the mechanical system we have. And hopefully that answers your question. It gets a little complicated when you get involved with chloramines and so on, and we've had this tested twice, and we would have to make changes to the infrastructure in order to improve it going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Osmond. Ms. Landry, any further questions received? We have no further questions. Okay, we're moving on to item 19, and this is passing of the following bylaws. Bylaw to authorize the entering into of an amended and restated unanimous shareholders agreement. Bylaw to amend the sign bylaw to allow for a streamlined permit process with respect to projection signs in the Heritage Sign Special Policy District within the downtown BIA. A bylaw to amend bylaw 0642017, being a bylaw to govern the proceedings of the council and its committees, and a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the council of the corporation town of Orangeville at its regular and closed council meeting held on September 14th, 2020. May I have a motion to pass these bylaws? Deputy Mayor McIntosh, seconded by Councillor Andrews. All in favor?
Yes.
Yes. Unanimously?
Yes.
And a motion to adjourn, please. Councillor Post, seconded by Councillor Andrews. All in favor?
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night, all.
Good evening, everyone.
Night.